Welcome, quilters. I'm so excited to be here with you today for our class. I want to start off by giving you a little background on myself. I'm Pam Heller, AccuQuilt's cutting expert. While I've been a part of the AccuQuilt team for over 9 years, I've actually been an avid quilter for more than 2 decades. I love the ease and speed of making quilt designs using the AccuQuilt system. Bright colors and modern blocks are my favorite, though I have been known to spend months quilting traditional and classic patterns. During my time at AccuQuilt, I've been able to teach a variety of classes, provide motivation and inspiration to our customers, work directly with our AccuQuilt retailers, host weekly live events, and test and design dies and patterns. Some would say that I have the dream job, and I would definitely agree. Today in this class, we will be looking at some of the specialty dies that are just beyond the basics you see in quilting and how to use them, and some different tips and tricks that will expand the beyond the basic knowledge you already have. Now, before we get to the beyond part, I want to touch real quick on a couple of basics. The AccuQuilt system is 90% faster than rotary cutters or scissors. So what does that mean to you, quilters? Well, what used to take you an hour to cut out, you can cut out in less than 6 minutes. That's going to give you 54 minutes every hour to do what you do the most. You want to quilt and sew during that time. Our product is safe and easy to use. You can always cut up to 6 layers of quilting cotton in one pass, but you can also cut other fabrics: flannel, felt, denim, wool, cork, minky. I'm going to tell you to start with 1 or 2 of those thicker fabrics. Our geometric shapes have a 1/4 inch seam allowance built in. Remember, quilters, you always want to cut on the lengthwise grain. Why? Well, that lengthwise grain is nice and tight, and you're going to get a good, clean cut. There are 2 exceptions to the lengthwise grain rule. We'll talk about both of them today. Don't forget, quilters, you want to use the appropriate size cutting mat. For example, if your die is a 6x12 die, you want to make sure you use a 6x12 mat. You don't want to use a big 10x24 mat. As it goes through the cutter, it's going to shimmy. Remember, quilters, our dies are only going to cut where there is fabric and a mat, so you can always use a smaller mat. For example, if I was cutting half square triangles on the flying geese die, I would just use a 6x6 cutting mat. It's not going to damage your blades on your dies or your mats. AccuQuilt has 3 cutter options to choose from. The first one is the Go Me Fabric Cutter Starter Set. This set is perfect for new quilters. Maybe you're a crafter or a fiber artist or a quilter on the go. It is our lightest, most compact cutter. It includes our Go Me cutter and 2 dies, a 3-inch finished half square triangle die and a 3-inch finished 1/4 square triangle die, a 6x6 cutting mat, and a pattern book to help you get started. Next up is our Ready, Set, Go. It is the ultimate fabric cutter starter set. This set literally has everything you need to get started. Just add fabric. It includes our Go fabric cutter, which is our manual machine, a Go 8-inch mix and match cube, which are those 8 shapes designed to make over 72 mix and match patterns, a 2.5-inch strip die. Why? What do you use 2.5-inch strips for? Everything. Binding, borders, sashing, jelly rolls. And you're going to see some amazing tips and tricks that I'm going to show you today using that strip die. A 10x24 cutting mat, and a great book by our good friend Eleanor Burns called Go Cube. It is a pattern book for projects and quilts using the cube system. We've also included a die pick to help you keep your dies clean and ready to use. Next up is our Go Big Fabric Cutter Starter Set. This is our electric and largest cutter. It's perfect for those of you who are making more than 6 to 8 quilts a year. Maybe you're doing charity quilts. Maybe you have some physical limitations. This machine helps reduce hand and arm strain. It includes our Go Big electric fabric cutter. This is the cutter I use every single day. Included in the set is a flying geese die. What is hard about flying geese? Yeah, everything, right? Getting those points together to make them even, make the sides line up. Since the flying geese die comes on a 6x12 die board, we've included a 6x12 cutting mat and a pattern book. Now remember, there are a variety of dies built just for the Go Big. And since it's 4 inches wider than our Go fabric cutter, you can actually run 2 of our smaller dies through in one pass through the cutter. All right, now that we have the basics out of the way, let's get to the beyond. We're gonna start off with our strip dies and a little bit of strip die magic. Now, here's some things that you should know about our strip dies. First of all, they are the most versatile of our Go dies. We have sizes that range from 1 inch to 6.5 inches. If you use our 2.5 inch strip die and 6 layers of fabric, you can cut enough binding for a queen size quilt in just one pass through the cutter. I'm going to show you about angled guidelines and how you can make squares and diamonds. Now this die, take a look at it. First of all, this is the first exception to the lengthwise grain rule. Why? When you cut strips, do you cut lengthwise grain? No, you cut with the fabric, 2.5, 5, 7.5, and so forth. All right? So this die actually only has 4 blades. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. There are no blades on this end and no blades on this end, okay? So we're gonna cut our width of fabric strips, and since there's 2.5, 2.5, and 2.5 equals 7.5 inches, I have just rough cut. I've added 1/4 of an inch on either side and just rough cut an 8-inch width of fabric strip, okay? So a couple of things you're gonna notice here. First of all, I've cut off my salvage edge. How come? Yeah, because you're gonna cut it off anyway, all right? What you wanna make sure is the fold of this fabric is parallel to this black line. This black line right here says, hey, there are no more blades past this point. So you wanna make sure your fold stops before that black line, and then it's parallel. Quilters, if your fabric is wonky like this, what's gonna happen is you're gonna get those mountains in the middle of your strips, and that's not what you wanna do, okay? All right, so I'm gonna lay my strip here, okay? Again, I've made sure that my fold is parallel to that black line. And then next, I'm just gonna put my cutting mat on top. Now today I'm gonna use my Go Big fabric cutter, but all of the dies that I show you today will also work in your Go fabric cutter. All right, so I'm gonna take and run it through the cutter. When my die gets to the other side of my Go Big, it's just gonna stop. All right. Now, as my die has come through the cutter, static has built up. So if I lift my cutting mat up, all those pieces are gonna stick to the mat. So what you wanna do is give that mat a little bit of love, all right? And then slide that mat, don't lift, all right? Now, look at this, quilters. We have perfect 2.5 inch strips. 2.5 on this end, 2.5 on this end, and look, no mountains in the middle. The reason we have perfect strips is that our fold was parallel to that black line. All right, now these angled guidelines right here are going to allow you to cut strips or squares and diamonds, okay? So I'm gonna take my perfect strips, and right here where it says 90 degrees, I'm gonna take my strip and I'm gonna run it right here next to 90 degrees because I wanna cut a whole bunch of squares, all right? So now I'm gonna take, and this is called fan folding, when I'm gonna take my fabric and go back and forth across the die. Now, here's the tip. You wanna make sure the fold of the fabric comes past the blades. So right where my fingernails are, that's where the blades are, okay? Now, some of you might say, oh, I could cut those squares with my rotary cutter. Well, actually you could, but I'm gonna teach you that you could actually start right here, fan fold back and forth, and then take your clear plastic ruler, all right, and line one of the black lines up on those blades. And then I'm just gonna take my strip, okay, and come right here next to that ruler. Fan fold back and forth. Look at how slick that is. All right, and I could go all the way down the die board and in one pass cut 126 squares. All right, think about that. Think of how fast and easy and accurate that's gonna be. Now let's say you wanna cut diamonds. We have your choice depending on what your pattern calls for. So maybe you need 30-degree diamonds or 45-degree diamonds or 60-degree diamonds. Today we're gonna cut 60-degree diamonds. So I'm gonna do exactly what I did over here with the squares. I'm gonna line up my strip next to my 60 degrees. I wanna make sure the fold comes past the blade. I'm gonna fan fold back and forth. Here we go. Perfect. And again, I could take my clear plastic ruler and go down the die board to cut diamonds. All right, I'm gonna put my mat right back on top. So strip die magic applies to all of our strip dies. If I wanted to cut 6.5-inch squares, I would cut 6.5-inch strips, turn them at 90 degrees and cut 6.5-inch squares. Or maybe I wanted to cut 3-inch 60-degree diamonds. I'm gonna cut 3-inch strips, turn them at 60 degrees. All right, give that mat a little bit of love. Slide, don't lift. All right. Now look at this, quilters. I have cut perfect squares for days. Look at how many squares I cut. Okay, gonna take off my little bits here. Now let me show you these diamonds because this is super cool. So now I've cut 60-degree diamonds. Think of how difficult that would be to cut with a rotary cutter, right? I mean, you have to cut a strip perfect and make sure it lines up at 60 degrees. Now sometimes quilters ask me, is there a die to make tumbling blocks? I'm gonna say, why yes, there is. Strip dies. So strip dies make these perfect diamonds. You want to cut them at 60 degrees. And then you're gonna put 3 together just like that. Isn't that slick? All right, so that's how you're gonna cut squares and diamonds. So next, quilters ask me all the time, well gosh, could I make a 4-patch or a 9-patch? Now some of you in your quilting head are gonna think, oh, I know how to do that. I just learned how to cut squares. So I'm gonna cut, let's say I'm gonna make a 4-patch, I'm gonna cut dark squares and light squares and sew them together. But I'm gonna tell you a fast, easy trick, all right? So the question you wanna ask yourself is, if you're going to sew them together, could you cut them together? Actually you can. So look at this. So here's a strip that I'm gonna make into a 4-patch. So notice I have a light and a dark, okay? I've sewed it together. Now, I'm not gonna press it open. I have my perfect little 1/4-inch seam here. I'm not gonna press them open, all right? Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come right here at 90 degrees and I'm gonna do exactly what I did with our other squares, right? I'm gonna fan fold back and forth. But how many times can I go back and forth? Yeah, just 3 because I have 2 layers of fabric sewn together, all right? Then again, I would take my clear plastic ruler, go all the way down the die board, and put on my cutting mat. All right? Run it through our cutter. This is such a fast and easy trick. All righty. Give it a little love. Slide that mat, don't lift. Quilters, look at this. Now I would press my seams to the dark side. And ta-da, I have perfect 4 patches. Isn't that slick? So then you could just sew them together, and because you've pressed to the dark side, those seams will nest. Okay, so that's how you make a 4 patch. So the next question you're gonna say to me is, hey, can I make a 9 patch? Well, of course you can. So quilters, what do you need for a 9 patch? Well, you need a strip that has a light and a dark and a light, and then another strip that has a dark and a light and a dark, right? Okay, because they're opposite. So let's talk about this one first. So what I did was I cut all my red and all my blue strips. Now I'm gonna press to the center, which is this blue section, right? I'm gonna consider that the dark side. And then here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take and put it on my die, and I'm gonna fan fold back and forth. I just did a width of fabric strip. But how many times can you go back and forth? Well, the answer is only 2. How come? Because you have to count this seam as 3 layers. And how many layers can you do? 6, okay? So I'm just gonna take my fabric and I'm just gonna fan fold back and forth. Now, quilters, look at this. See this little fabric right here? Some of you are a little stressed about that because I'm gonna leave it like that as I run it through my cutter. The reason I'm gonna do that is the blades are inside the die. There are no blades inside our cutter. So if there's a little bit of fabric that hangs over, no worries, okay? And then I'm gonna do the same here with my opposite strip, okay? All right. Put my cutting mat on top, because what happens if you try to use a die without a cutting mat? Absolutely nothing, okay? It won't even go through the cutter. All right. Give that mat a little love. Slide, don't lift. Now look at this, quilters. Look how cool this is. So see, here is my little extra piece. Nothing happened to it because there are no blades inside the cutter. So now I can take and I can put this strip in the middle. I've pressed all the same direction, right? I think on this one I pressed all to the red. And now I've made a perfect 9 patch. Look at how fast and easy that was to make. All right, so quilters, sometimes we hear about our 2.5 inch strip die, right? Because that is the die that we use to make binding, all right? And it's our most popular size from our 1 inch to our 6.5 inch strip dies because you can make binding and borders and jelly rolls. But I'm gonna tell you that binding can be kind of tricky. So today I'm gonna show you something that absolutely totally changed my life. It is called flange binding, okay? And I have a little sample of it here, okay? And what flange binding needs are 2 dies. You need the die that cuts a 1.5 inch strip and a die that cuts a 1 3/4 inch strip. So here are the 2 dies you need for flange binding. Now, I'm gonna get this question all the time. Quilters say to me, oh, can I use other sizes of strips to make my flange binding? I want you to know I've tried it, okay? I tried with like 2.5 and 2 or 2 and 1.5. Okay, it just doesn't work as well. So 1.5 and 1 3/4 is what you wanna do, okay? Those are the 2 dies that you wanna use. All right, so flange binding, let's talk about it. First of all, it's gonna create this cute little piece of peekaboo color, all right? So you're gonna cut your 2 strips. You're gonna cut 1.5 inch strip and a 1 3/4 inch strip. And the biggest one, the 1 3/4 inch, okay, is what's gonna create that little peekaboo of color. So when you're thinking about flange binding, you wanna think in your quilting head, what's the color that I want to come through, okay? So I'm gonna sew them together with a perfect 1/4 inch seam. Now typically when you do binding, you just press at the seam, right? Well, with flange binding, what you're gonna do is you're gonna press where the raw edges meet, okay? So I'm gonna fold it and I'm gonna give it a really good press, all right? And here's what my strip is gonna look like. So now here's the front of my quilt, here's the back. I am gonna press and make sure that it's all pressed down, and then I'm gonna sew this flange binding strip to the back of my quilt with that little peak of color facing down, okay? And then I'm gonna sew a perfect 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm gonna tell you that I typically, once I create flange binding, I'm gonna give this a good press, all right? And then when I flip it to the front, look at this. Now, quilters, I can just stitch in the ditch. I can tell you that this has changed my whole life about binding, because sometimes I spent more time binding a quilt than I did cutting and sewing it together, okay? So maybe you're thinking about doing charity quilts or quilts for your grandchildren. Flange binding is the kind of binding you want to use. All right? Now, what about bias binding? Quilters ask me that all the time. All right, can you cut bias binding? And I'm gonna say, of course you can, all right? So when you're going to do bias binding, I'm gonna cut it today on my 2.5 inch strip die. Bias binding, you wanna cut width of fabric 16 inches, okay? So 16 inches with the fabric strip. Now, I have also tried other sizes. I've tried like 18 or 14. 16 is the magic number, all right? Then once I've cut my strip, I'm gonna cut off that salvage edge. How come? Yeah, you're gonna cut it off anyway, all right? And then I did a really good job pressing my fabric, okay? So there weren't any obvious like wrinkles and such. All right, so now here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna open up your strip really big like this. And then you're gonna take this side and you're gonna fold it down just like this, 45 degrees. And look, right here now, look at this. Look at all that stretch. That is the bias part of our binding, right? So now what I'm gonna do is come to the other side and I'm gonna fold it up just like this. So I folded them opposite. Now, very carefully, I am gonna turn my bias fabric, all right? So now the bias edge is parallel to the blades in my die, all right? And again, quilters, I'm gonna tell you, you might wanna practice this a couple of times. And then I'm gonna bring it up to meet it. Now you'll notice, quilters, that my fabric is not centered on my die. So I'm gonna very carefully just bring it down, okay? All right? And then I'm gonna fold it in together like an envelope. Yeah, look at this. Okay, now once I've folded it in, you're gonna notice like here's the edge of the blades here. Ooh, and I've gone past the blades. So again, I'm just gonna kind of move my little envelope here. Can't exceed the 6-layer rule. Okay, all right, and once everything is on, I made sure that all my fabrics comes before the edges of the blades. Then I'm gonna put my mat on top and run it through my cutter. Now, quilters, why would you use bias binding? What would you use it for? Yeah, so like maybe you're doing a double wedding ring, so you have those curved edges. or the tumbler quilt, and you have those curved pieces. You want to make sure you use bias binding so that it goes around those edges perfectly. All right, here we go. Give it some love. Slide, don't lift. So the first thing I'm going to tell you, quilters, is that you want to take these pieces here off. Oh, because in your quilting head, you're going to think they're 2.5-inch strips, and they're really not. Okay, they can be kind of a variety of sizes. Now look at this. Look at this, perfect bias strips. And look, all of that great stretch. Now this works with all of our strip dies that have the same size strips. All right, and now quilters, you know beyond the basic use of strip dies. All right, so let's talk about some specialty dies. Now, we're all familiar with the geometric shapes and cube dies that AccuQuilt has, but we also have some specialty dies that go beyond that. So first would be our English paper piecing cube. Yes, AccuQuilt has dies for English paper piecing that cut both the fabric and the paper. And yes, you can cut them both with your dies. All right, so here is our English paper piecing cube. We're going to open it up just like this. I'm going to pull the skinny one first. It'll allow me to pull the other pieces easily. Now remember, with our cube system, they come in their own storage container. Those dies are stored correctly, like books on a shelf. All right? And we're going to open it up and see what's inside. So the first one we're going to open is this. Our English paper piecing cube has 4 shapes: hexagons, half hexagons, diamonds, and triangles. So if we open this up right here, we can see that here is the hexagon shape, and here is the corresponding shape that will cut the paper centers. All right, so here's for the fabric, and we've allowed for that 1/4-inch seam allowance. And here's the one that is going to cut paper. I'm going to tell you, you can cut cardstock. I would just do 1 or 2 layers at a time. Notice inside we have these little circles. It's going to cut out the center so that when you're done with your English paper piecing, you can just take your needle or your seam ripper and just flip those little pieces right out. All right? So here's the next shape. Here's half hexagons and the paper that goes with them. All right. The great thing about the cube is that all of the pockets have a diagram so you know right where your dies can go back to. So see, look right here. All right, so I'm going to fold these up, and let's see the other shapes in the English paper piecing cube. So here's the next ones. All right, so these are equilateral triangles, and here's the paper shapes for it. Look how tiny these are. Think how difficult it would be to cut these by hand with a rotary cutter or scissors. And then here are 60-degree diamonds. Also included in every cube are patterns to use all of the shapes in our English paper piecing cube. There's also this amazing book by our good friend Katja Merrick that describes how to use all of the shapes to make amazing English paper piecing products. All right, so now let's put these away. Included in the little pocket that comes in every cube is a mat and a pattern book. Check out all of our great YouTube videos on how to do English paper piecing. All right, now AccuQuilt actually offers individual dies that can be used for English paper piecing. All right, Again, the die includes both the larger shapes to cut your fabric and the smaller shapes to cut paper templates. We have dies for 1 inch finished sides and 1/2 inch finished sides. All right, so let's look at this one. Perfect. So this is the hexagons. So again, this is gonna cut my fabric and this is gonna cut my paper. All right, so here's some examples of some fabric pieces that I've already cut, and on the back, I've already used my paper templates. All right, now quilters, you can always do your hand stitching, which is the traditional method to use your English paper piecing, but we actually have some great videos on how to use your sewing machine to sew your hexagons. So let's cut some hexagons and paper and show you how easy it is. So what I've done here, quilters, is I'm gonna take my fabric and I'm just gonna cover my shapes. All right, now how many layers can we do? 6 layers, you're right. Okay, and then I have some cardstock that I'm gonna use to cut my centers, okay? Again, don't worry about this little piece that's hanging off because there's no blades inside our cutters. I'm gonna use the appropriate size mat and run it through our cutter. Now, the smaller single versions of our hexagons are on a 6x12 die board. So it will fit through any of our cutters, including our Go Me. Right, give it a little love, slide, don't lift. And now look at this, quilters. I have cut hexagons for days, and perfect hexagons. You know, to cut hexagons without a die, you would have to cut a strip and a rectangle and a 1/4 inch ruler, and it just takes so long. So now what I can do is I can take my hexagons, all right, and put my paper center in the middle, and then just take my little glue stick, and then you're just gonna put your pieces down, and it's gonna create your hexagons. Super fast, super easy. All right, so let's take a look at these samples that we made from our English paper piecing dies. Now, these are free downloadable patterns from AccuQuilt.com. All right, let me move my little pieces over here. Thank you. All right, so quilters, first of all, here we have our Go Butterfly Tote Bag. And I love it. It's nice and big, and it has some lining in it, so it's thick. And it's big enough you could actually put your English paper piecing cube. And since those are on 6x6 die boards, you could totally put your Go Me inside. This butterfly uses all of the shapes in the English paper piecing cube. Here's the hexagons, the half hexagons, here's those 60-degree diamonds, and then right here are those little tiny triangles. The back is made with our 2.5 inch strip die. This is our Go Butterfly Tote Bag. All right. Next, this is one of my favorite starter projects. So if you're new to English paper piecing and you're thinking, gosh, I'd really like to start, this is actually a really great way to start. It's called beaded curtain wall hanging, and it's gonna use half hexagons, and there's those triangles and hexagons, okay? But it's a small enough project that you could cut all of your pieces together and keep them together in a little zippy pouch, like here's my little travel zippy pouch, okay? And then you could just start with this. This is a great way to start with hand piecing. All right, and speaking of zipper pouches, look at these cute little pouches that we have, all right? So here we have our hexagons, here's our diamonds and our half hexagons, and a little pouch for inside. And you could store your templates, your paper templates, and your fabric, and totally take this with you. These are English paper piecing zipper pouches. Next is actually one of the more traditional projects that I would say that you can make with your English paper piecing. This is called Go Hexagon Gardens. So sometimes we refer to this as grandmother's flower garden, but again, here's all of those hexagons from the English paper piecing. What a great way to bust up your stash and use your scraps. Quilters, how many here make rag quilts? What's difficult about rag quilts? Yeah, cutting all of that tiny little fringe. Well, guess what? AccuQuilt offers a variety of rag dyes. We'll take away the fuss of cutting all of that fringe. So with these dyes, you're definitely going to want a dye pick, because rag dyes include all of these blades right here around the edges. And what happens is when you cut fabric with them, little strings get caught down here. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to bring your patience and give this particular dye a lot of love. You want to use that dye pick where you're going to just take the edges, all right, of the dye and just come right here towards the blades and pull out those little strings. Another great tip is to use a lint roller brush to just go over the top of your dye, and that's also going to pull up those tiny little strings. It just works amazing. AccuQuilt has a variety of sizes of rag dyes that cut squares. The first cuts an 8.5-inch square. The second cuts a 5.25-inch square, which is the die that I have here. Now in your quilting head, you're gonna think that those don't work together, but actually they do. So let's talk about how you wanna lay your fabric on our rag dyes. So first of all, I'm gonna tell you, since we have so many blades here, you're just gonna wanna lay 2 layers of fabric. Now, what I did was I measured from here to here, added 1/4 inch, and just rough cut with the fabric, and then I subcut my fabric to just go over these squares, all right? So I have 2 layers, but here's the most important thing. You want to make sure that your wrong sides are facing each other, and I'll show you why in just a second. All right, it's on a 6x12 die board, so I'm going to use my 6x12 cutting mat. Again, this would fit in all of our cutters, including our Go Me. All right, here we go. Give it a little love. Slide, don't lift. And look at this. This is just amazing. So I'm just going to pull back my fabric here. And look at this. Ta-da! So the die cut all of the fabric, and look, all of the fringe. It also cut out the corners here at 1 inch. And the fringe right here is only cut at 3/4 inch. That way you can sew from corner to corner and not catch the fringe. But the reason I put wrong sides together is so that I could just peel back my first layer, all right? And then you want to put in your batting squares. So I actually took and cut these squares using my strip die. Did you know you could cut batting with a strip die? You can. All right, so I'm going to put it together to make my little pocket or packet of pillows. Here we go. And I'm going to put this right here. Put it on top. Now these pieces are ready to be stitched. So what you're going to do is you're going to start here in the corner, and you're going to stitch from corner to corner with your sewing machine. All right? And I'm just going to chain piece for days. All right? And then you're going to turn it the opposite direction and stitch from here to here. So here's one that I've already stitched. And you can see how it has this little X in the middle. And then you're going to take your pieces and you're actually going to put wrong sides together and stitch here. So here's where all the fringe is going to live. And then here on the back, it's going to be flat. All right? So here's kind of my pro tip. Once you've sewn all your pieces together, you want to stick your quilt in a huge, big pillowcase. Tie the top and put it in your washing machine on delicate. And then what's going to happen is it's going to pull out all of those threads. Yeah. And then you can throw it in your dryer. Again, keep it in the pillowcase. And then I just, probably for 10 or 15 minutes, I just throw it in on a low heat. And again, it's going to pull those threads out. Then I take it outside, open it up, shake it, and then put it back in my dryer. All right, now we have squares, but we also have a circle rag die. So check this out. Our circle rag die is meant to create circles so that you can create cathedral windows. All right, let's look at some samples using our rag die. All right, so here's the first one. Look at this big cozy quilt. This is a big cozy rag. I know, look at how fun this is. So we actually used flannel with this. So again, you can see all the fringe. Look right here. The back is just going to be flat. I know, look at this. So again, if I'm using flannel, I'm going to pretty much use a light flannel, just cut 2 layers at a time. Now, sometimes when I use flannel, I don't add that batting. That's kind of up to you. So this is a sample of the squares. And then here's a sample of the circles to make cathedral window placemats. Look at how fun these are. So with the circle rag die, you would cut the circles, do what I did and cut the batting for the center and the squares, and then you're going to sew your rows together and then bring them in and stitch right here to create cathedral windows. Now look at how fun this one is. We use denim. Did you know you could cut denim with your dies? I'm going to tell you to start with just 1 layer of denim. But what a great way to like upcycle and reuse old jeans. All right. Next we have hexagon dies. Now these are great because not only do we have hexagons, but AccuQuilt has come out with equilateral triangles and half hexagons to help you avoid those Y seams. I know sometimes Y seams, people are a little nervous about that. All right, so let me just show you how these all work together. All right, so first of all, I have these 3 dies that are our smaller hexagon dies. All right, so here's our hexagon. Here's our equilateral triangles, and here's our half hexagons. All right, so you have 3 different options. You'll notice that each one of our sizes has a corresponding size, right? So you can kind of mix them up. So first, let's talk about hexagons. Now, when you cut our hexagons, you're just going to put them together so you're going to sew Y seams on it, all right? So here's my row of hexagons that I've cut. And notice I've marked them with that 1/4-inch seam so that I can put together rows together to make Y seams. And here is my finished row where I've put together my Y seams. Look how fun that is. All right, and again, I did it with my machine. Take a minute, make sure you mark that 1/4-inch seam all the way there, right? Okay, so let's show you how hexagons work with equilateral triangles. All right, so now let me show you this super cool trick. I'm gonna cut my hexagons and my equilateral triangles, all right? So again, I'm gonna find that lengthwise grain, nice and tight, measured from here to here, added 1/4 of an inch, just rough cut a whole big strip. Okay, I'm gonna do the same here with my equilateral triangles. Now, since I am using my Go Big fabric cutter, I'm gonna put a mat over each of the shapes. Remember, it's only going to cut where there's fabric and a mat. And I'm going to run both of these dies through in one pass. I know, it's super cool. Look at that. So if one die is 90% faster, then two must be exponentially faster, right? All right, here we go. Give it a little love. Slide that mat, don't lift. Okay, there's my equilateral triangles. Give it a little love. Slide my mat, don't lift. And there are my perfect hexagons. Listen, hexagons are so hard to cut with a rotary cutter. All right? Now, I already have some pieces sewn together, but what you're going to end up doing is you're going to take your hexagon and you're going to add an equilateral triangle to either side, just like this. Okay? You're going to sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to tell you to press towards the hexagons, all right? So here's some that I have already made, okay? And you're just going to put them together in rows, just like this. And I'm going to tell you, quilters, that I always lay out my pieces as I'm sewing them together. All right, and the reason is so that I can make sure I'm sewing them together correctly, because I've done that incorrectly before, okay? All right, and so you kind of create this star design, and that allows you to not have to have any Y seams. So you have a couple of options here. You can make your hexagons all different like I did, and the equilateral triangles the same color, or you can make the equilateral triangles all different and the hexagons the same color. I know, isn't that fun? All right, and then the last shape I'm going to show you, these are half hexagons. Now, some of you might say to me, oh, Pam, I don't need to buy the half hexagon die. I'm just going to take the hexagons and cut them in half. What's wrong with that, quilters? Yeah, what's wrong with that is we've added that 1/4 inch seam allowance built in. So if you just took our cute little hexagon die right here, cut hexagons and cut them in half and sewed them together, you'd have hamburger buns, not hexagons. Okay, it would be all smushed and short. All right, so again, just like I did with my others, I'm just gonna lay my fabric out here. This was such a great way to kind of bust up some stash. All right, use my smaller die because I'm only gonna cut those half hexagons. Perfect. Give it some love, slide, don't lift. Okay, so now here's my perfect hexagons. Well, my little half hexies. So what you're gonna do, quilters, is you wanna lay out all the rows, okay? Because when you sew them together, what's gonna happen is you're just gonna sew a straight seam, okay? And then what you wanna do is lay out the next row. So now when you sew these rows together, these are gonna be full hexagons, right? So the next row would have this piece here, and maybe we'll put this piece right here. We'd have another gray, and then just another random piece. So when you sew half hexagons together, you wanna make sure you lay out all of your pieces so that at the end, you don't have to make Y seams, all right? All right, so now let's have a little sample trunk show of some of the projects you can make using hexagons and half hexagons and equilateral triangles. All right, so the first right here, this one is called Island Star. It's nice and big. Okay, so this one has used our big 4.5 inch hexagons, right? And our equilateral triangles. So look how pretty this is. Again, a great way to kind of bust up your stash, use up your scraps, and not a Y seam to be found. Okay? Now this one is actually one of my favorite projects. This one is called Twirling Star. So let me get it out here, it's really big. Some of our projects are really nice and big. Okay, first of all, I love like all the autumnal colors on it. Isn't that just so pretty? So what shape did we use here, quilters? We did, we used those half hexagons. So I want you to think for a minute, look, right here. So these half hexagons actually made what? Yeah, equilateral triangles. And then we followed the pattern to go all the way around to make a big hexagon. So we used half hexagons to make triangles and triangles to make hexagons. I know, isn't that amazing? So this is a super fun pattern. It's called twirling star. Now next is one where we talk about colorway all the time, right? And how color makes a difference. So this one is called our triangle hexagon wall hanging. So what we've done here is we just used 2 colors for our hexagons, and then the background little equilateral triangles are all the same. So it gives it a completely different look than our island star quilt. So again, the same concept, hexagons and equilateral triangles, but the color made it all the difference. Next, let's talk about curved piecing dies. Now listen, some of you might avoid curved piecing because it might make you a little bit nervous. You're thinking, ooh, I'm kind of scared of those curved pieces. But AccuQuilt added notches to their curved piecing dies, so you can sew them and cut them and sew them and line them up and put them together perfectly. So I'm going to show you today apple core. We also have drunkard's path and clamshell. So let's talk about this die here. It is our apple core die, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to cut your pieces and then how to line them up. All right, so this is kind of a beginner die. I would tell you if you're new to curved piecing, this is the die that you want to use. So here we have a curve, and look, there's a notch. Here we have a curve, and there's a notch, and so forth, okay? So I'm going to lay my fabric just like I always do with the lengthwise green. And again, this is such a great die to kind of maybe use up your scraps, okay? Do a little stash busting, right? And then I'm going to take my cutting mat. You can always cut 6 layers. All right, give it a little love. Slide that mat, don't lift. And now look, quilters, we've cut those pieces perfectly and we've cut out those notches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you to take your pieces, all right? So we're going to start here. I'll use some of these over here, okay? So here's my 2 pieces that I'm going to start with. And it's really important, and you'll never forget this once I show you. You want the smiley face to be on the top and the frowny face to be on the bottom, all right? So when you're looking at your curves, are they a smiley face or a frowny face? There's that frowny face, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line them up here, and what I like to do is line them up here on my green cutting mat, because then I know the notch is here and the notch is here, okay? And then I'm going to put my notch from the top piece and line it up, okay? And then I'm going to take my pin. I'm telling you, you want to pin these, okay? I'm going to pin it here. And then, because I've cut on that lengthwise green, I'm going to come right here to the corner and put another pin, okay? Just line them up. And then another pin. And see, because I've cut on that lengthwise green, it's going to line up perfectly. Okay? Then I'm just going to take this to my machine and stitch around, and it's going to come together absolutely beautiful. Okay? So this is how you sew curved pieces. All right, we also have a couple of other dies that have curved pieces. So let me just show you those real quick. So here's our clamshell. Okay, look at this cute little clamshell. So again, I've just taken and lined up my notches so that my clamshell comes together perfectly. All right, and we actually have clamshell in a bigger size, so if you wanted to use layer cakes, this was perfect for charm squares. This would be perfect for your layer cakes. And then we have a variety of sizes of drunkard's path. So again, here's that curve, there are those notches. All right, so here's some beautiful quilt samples that we made using some of our curved pieced dies. All right, so this is our first one, and this one is so pretty. Just really reminds me of spring. So we have our little pink appliqué, and then here's our green. And you can see how those pieces came together beautifully because we have notches on all of those pieces. Okay? Next, we used our big clamshell die to make the Go Beachcombing quilt. Again, a great way to use your layer cakes. Again, even these tiny little stems right here for the clamshell, those came together perfectly because we have notches. All right? Next, let's talk about drunkard's path. So this die actually uses two sizes of drunkard's path. So let me pull it here in the middle. Okay. So here we've used our larger drunkard's path and our smaller drunkard's path. And the thing I really like about this particular one is that we just added half the shapes here in the corner, right? We didn't put the whole drunkard's path together. And the white gives it a different look all around. I just really like this one. This is drunkard's path flower. Now here's kind of a retro look at drunkard's path. So we use kind of different colors that we'd normally use. And then what shape is this, quilters? Yeah, these are half square triangles. You would find those in your cube, all right? And then it works perfectly with your drunkard's path die. Look how fun that is. Next, quilters, I want to talk about the log cabin die for just a few minutes. We're going to talk about this die as the ultimate scrap busting die in this class. It's also a block on board, so all the shapes that you need to create a block are on one die board. But today we're going to talk about it as scrap busting. Now this die is probably one of the best scrap busting dies you will ever own. All right, so first of all, let's take a look at this particular die. Okay, a couple of things. First of all, this is not a strip die, because some of you are going to think, oh, I can use this as a strip die. No, 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 no. It has enclosed blades. Okay, so actually you have to treat it like all of our other lengthwise grain dies, okay? So you're gonna make sure that you're cutting the strips on those lengthwise grain. Second, some of you are gonna think, oh, I have a whole bunch of jelly rolls. I'm just gonna throw that there on that log cabin die. Well, first of all, log cabin cuts a 1.5 inch high strip. How wide is a jelly roll? Yeah, 2.5 inches, okay? So what it's gonna do is it's going to waste fabric and the lengthwise grain rule is gone. It's wrong, okay? So, now, this is the die that I use every time I finish a project, all right? So you know you have all those scraps, and what do you do with them? Do you put them in a box or a drawer, wherever you put them? All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the scraps that are left over from my quilts or my projects. All right, so here's a really good example of one. All right, and what I'm gonna do, actually I'm gonna use this one. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring it here and I'm gonna find the widest log that it will fit on, okay? Because not only does it cut the height, but it cuts the width as well. So there's a blade here and here and here and here and one in the center, all right? So I'm gonna take this here and it looks like it's gonna fit perfectly over my shape number 3. But it'll also fit over shape 2 and 1. So I'm actually just gonna take and fold this back and forth. How many layers can I do? 6, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, and 6. Perfect, okay? And then I had this really great piece right here. So again, I'm gonna kind of bring it here and oh look, it will fit over shape number 9. Now you could continue to fill it out. Maybe you had wider strips that were 11, okay? you could just continue to do that. So I'm just going to take my fabric, and remember when we talk about fan folding, you want to make sure you cover the blades. So there's 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Okay, so I want to make sure that my fabric is covering all of my blades right there. Okay, and then I'm going to take my cutting mat. Now if I just had shape number 5, I could use a smaller mat, right? But I'm going to use my bigger mat. Don't forget, this will fit in your Go Cutter as well. So remember, on the die, the logs finish to 1 inch high, and then it does all of the widths. So on shape number 4, it would be a 1 by 4 inch finished log. All right? Give it some love. Slide that mat don't left. Look at this. Okay, see, this is what happens. The static builds up. Okay? So now look at this. I have perfect shape number 9, little logs for that. And I have logs for 1 and 2 and 3. Okay? All right? And then quilters, I have this super high-tech way of storing my shapes. I have 12 Ziploc bags. Okay? They're numbered 1 through 12. So when I do this, when I finish a project like this, and I have all these pieces, I just would throw these in bag number 1, these in bag number 2, these in bag number 3, and so forth, okay? And then eventually I have enough to make a project or even a quilt. Now, something else that is really great is you don't have to use all the logs if you don't want to. If you want to make an 8-inch log cabin, you would only use shapes 1 through 8. There's also this really great variation of a log cabin block called courthouse steps. All right, so this one here, see right here in the H, in the center, that's H, it stands for Heller. But on this particular one, I only use shapes 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Right? So you don't have to use all the blocks. In this one, we just use 2 colors, but you could totally make this scrappy and this be solid, or you could make the lights scrappy and the darks scrappy, however you want to. All right, so let's take a look at our log cabin samples. All right, we have so many. First of all, there is this one. So this is called our Scrappy Log Cabin Quilt. Now, the Scrappy Star has scrappy on what we would consider the dark, and the same for the lights. Could you totally make it scrappy for the lights? Of course you can. Okay, and this one is just really great because we just use the same fabrics over and over again. So maybe in your stash you have some fabric and you're thinking, ooh, I would really love to make a log cabin with that. That'd be really fun. All right, next is this one. All right, so this is actually our log cabin love wall hanging. So look at this. The center of the heart, we used pinks and red. And then to create the heart look, we have pinks and reds and whites. So again, quilters, you don't always have to make hearts red. They could be purple or blue or multicolored, whatever color you want. All right, now next one, this is actually one of my favorite quilts because we use the log cabin shape here for the outside. But for the centers, we cut a 6.5-inch square, so it finishes to 6 inches. And then we used our Northwoods medley die and added the applique shapes. So the tree and the bear and the moose. Notice we've used those free embroidery download stitches that are available from AccuQuilt.com. So then we used shape 7, 8, 9, and 10 to build out our blocks. This is called Log Cabin in the Woods quilt. It is such a fun, fun pattern. All right, next we have quilted leaves and logs wall hanging. So this one was really fun because we created log cabins in the corners and then created blocks that have all of just a variety of leaves from our dies that have leaves on them. And again, you can see those free embroidery download stitches and how pretty this looks. This is quilted leaves and log wall hanging. Now, quilters, let's talk about our project dies. There are dies that are made to make a specific project. And AccuQuilt has a variety of these project dies. We have the baby bib die, the stocking die, the Go burp cloth die, the Go pin cushion, Go pennants, and the Go big bowl cozy die. So I have a variety of them here in the studio to just kind of talk about them for a second. Okay, so first of all, this is our Go big bowl cozy die. Quilters, you can only use this die in your Go big. If your cutter has a handle, this die will not fit in it. It will only fit in our Go Big Electric. All right? Next, this is the baby bib. So look how fun this one is. So I would tell you if you're getting the baby bib, you might want to get the burp cloth die as well. And again, I just did 2 layers when I made mine I did one side was flannel and the other side was cotton. So you could totally put them together. And you have your option. You could turn it in, you could stitch around and turn your bib inside out. I just actually top stitched along it and then just added a snap. Look how fun this die is. This is our pin cushion die. So the cool thing about this die is this square is for the top and the bottom. And then along here, there's little notches. So it can go around the top and the bottom. You could fill your pin cushions with lots of things. You could use batting, you could use crushed walnuts, you could use silicone pellets, whatever you want. But one of my favorite parts about this die is the 2 applique shapes. So we have that old-fashioned featherweight sewing machine and the spool for thread. So I'm going to tell you if you're going to use the applique shapes, you want to add them to the top before you sew your pin cushion together. All right? And here's the pennants die. This is one of my favorite dies. I use it all the time. Comes with 3 different shapes of pennants. Some cool things that I've cut out of our pennant die. I've used obviously cotton, but I've used felt and craft foam. I've used burlap, all different kinds of fabrics that you can cut using our pennants die. All right? So let's look at our cute little trunk show of some of the projects that you can make with our project dies. Okay, so first let's start here with the bowl cozy dies. Look at this. We have made bowl cozies for days. And look how fun this is. The thing you want to remember about the bowl cozies is if you're going to put them in the microwave, so if you're going to put your bowl with your soup inside and heat it up in the microwave, you want to make sure that all of your fabric, your batting, and your thread is 100% cotton. But these are really fast, easy projects that you can make. These make really great gifts. Next are pin cushions for days. Look how fun this is. So this is a sample of how we've appliqued that cute little sewing machine to the top. And this is actually a pattern that we have on our website that has a little pocket here. So you could put your little bindy clips there. So not only can you keep track of your pins, but your binding clips as well. All right, now we have a whole bunch of burp claws and baby bibs. So we'll get these out here for you. So a couple of fun things. So here's our baby bib and burp cloth. So our burp cloth here, we just cut it out of flannel. Super easy to make. What you're gonna do is you're gonna stitch around it, leave an opening, right? Turn it inside out and just top stitch. And here's some samples of the bibs. Look how fun these are. And some of them we used Velcro. Okay, this one has a little Velcro square as well. Now your burp claws don't always have to be burp claws. For example, this is like a little couch caddy. So you would put it right here at the end of your couch to go over the arm. And it has pockets sewn in it. So you could put your sewing supplies in here. You could stick your little small scissors in here. You could throw in a spool of thread. I love this one. Here is our pet dish. So if you have a smaller dog or a cat and you want to put their pet dish bowls right here, it keeps the floor from getting all dirty. This one is so fun. And look, paw prints on the back. Okay. You can also make two-handed oven mitts with our burp cloth die. This is a really fun pattern. This applique shape is our cupcake die. And then the last one is actually a makeup bag. So again, we've created that burp cloth and we just added little pockets to put in different sizes of brushes. And then you could roll it up. We've added ribbon to tie it. All right, and then let me show you two more projects that you can make with our project dies. The first are these modern stockings. So we used our Go stocking die and gave it a completely different look. Really modern colors. Here we have some hexagons. So this is a really fun project you can make. And then last, this is our popsicle throw quilt. So we've actually taken that bottom shape from the pennant die to create these super fun popsicles. And then we used our cube to make the stars. So think about that. Think about, how about a little purse from your bib die? I know. Or a tombstone out of that rounded pennant for Halloween. A beanbag toss game out of our pincushion die. Now these dies can be used for so many other things. So quilters, when you buy a die from AccuQuilt, just don't think, oh, I can just make this with that or that with that. Go beyond the basic and look at what else you can make with them. All right, quilters, one last thing I want to touch on are our applique dies. Did you know that AccuQuilt has over 100 applique dies? And those that are non-licensed comes with a free embroidery download that includes 3 different stitches: a blanket stitch, a satin stitch, and a motif stitch. Now these dies are much like our project dies, where folks think that they can just make what the die is intended for. But let's take a look at a couple of our applique dies. All right, quilters, how about the owl die? Obviously you can make an owl, but what if you shift the wings to the points on his ears? Now you have a rabbit. Or if you take the eyes and move them up to where the ears are and add a couple of extra wings, now you have a frog. I have seen so many animals made from this one die. And guess what? We also have an accessories die, so you can add even more shapes and create even more animals, all right? So let me show you how I'm gonna make a little pig today. So here's the owl die, and here's the owl eyes and the wings, all right, and his little beaks. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my little pink fabric here, and you can pre-fuse your fabric to use them as applique shapes. And I'm gonna put some little fabric over here on what's gonna be his snout, and then right here over the beak and the center eye. All right, again, the owl die and accessories die are in 6x6 die boards, so you can use them with any of our Go cutters, including the Go Me. Give it a little love, slide that mat, don't lift. All right, so now I'm gonna take and I'm gonna add this and his little nose for the snout. See how you can start to make your little pig, all right? And then these pieces here kind of become the pig's hooves, all right? All right, so let's show you a couple of samples of how we've made other shapes using our owl die. All right, so first we're gonna start with just owls. This is called our outrageous, I know, right? I love a good pun, wall hanging. This is super cute. So here we've used the owl shape and all of our owls are different. We've given it a little stem and a little leaf to stand on like it would be in a tree. Again, these are such a great way to bust up your stash and use up your scraps. All right, next we have talk to the animals. So all of these 9 animals were made with our Go Owl die. So here's the frog, here's the owl wings and the eyes. All right, here's our raccoon, here's our bunny rabbit, here's its little fluffy tail. And remember we were talking about our pig? So here's the shapes that I started to cut out to show you our pig. Look at how fun that is. So you would cut more eyes, and then the beak right here is this little squirrely tail. No, isn't that cute? Okay. All right, next we have Hoot Hoot Hooray. This is a really fun wall hanging, and again, we've used our owl die. Now, quilters, don't forget we have a free embroidery download for all of our non-licensed applique shapes, but we also on our website have for purchase embroidery downloads. And this is a sample of how we have taken those for purchase embroidery files and made really fancy owls. So quilters, I'm going to tell you that with any die you own, don't just think, oh, I can just only make the shape that it's intended for. Go beyond that and look at the shapes on the die and think about what else could you use them for, such as binding, borders, other shapes, etc. I hope this class has opened up a whole new world for you and you don't go anywhere just yet because you have to see what's new. AccuQuilt is always coming out with new products each month, so let's take a look at what's new so far. Now, before I dive into what's new, I have to let you know that all of these products I'm about to discuss are excluded from any sales. All right, quilters, check out the Go Feather Star die. This beautiful die makes a 16-inch finished block, so it's going to work well with your 8-inch cube and your 4-inch cube. Now this die has an intricate pattern and you might say to yourself, ooh, this might be really tough to put together, but because it has specialized dog ears and only 2 Y seams, it's going to go together perfectly. So check out the Go Sparkling Star Throw Quilt. This particular pattern, we've used the feather star almost like a medallion quilt. So we've used a variety of strip dies along the edge to create this beautiful showcase for the feather star. And then the outer border, which kind of gives it a 3D look, was actually made with our cube. Next is the Go Icy Hot Stars wall hanging. And this one is really fun because you can see the 2 different colorways, even though they're just black and white and red, different colorways here. Again, beautiful, intricate design, really easy to put together because of those dog ears. You want to make sure that you can check out our Go Quilt program with this particular die, a great way to totally change up the colors and make the feather star in the colors you want. Quilters, the Go Weather Vane die makes a finished 8-inch block. So it's perfect to use with your 8-inch cube, but think about setting these blocks on point and using the Go 8-inch setting triangles. Now this die only has 4 shapes, so it can be mastered by any skill level. Here is a beautiful example of the Go Weather Vane. This is called the Go Weather Vane Baby Quilt. Okay, I love this quilt because it's a total stash buster, right? You could just use scraps from different colors and make your weather vanes completely different like this block. And again, look, just those 4 simple shapes. Now, some of you might think it needs a Y seam, but it doesn't. These shapes right here are actually created to make half square triangles sewn together to help you avoid that Y seam. Next up is the Go Monochromatic Weather Vane Throw Quilt. I love the beautiful spring colors of this, kind of those peaches and pinks. This is a perfect example of how you would want to use Go Quilt to change the colorway of your quilt. Maybe you want to make it for the holidays. Maybe you want to make winter with blues and whites. Maybe you want to make it spring colors. Any way you want to use it, you can use our Go Quilt. It's a free program available at AccuQuilt.com. Next up, quilters, are the Go Setting Triangles. The Go Setting Triangles come in 6 sizes to work with the 6 sizes of the cubes. 4-inch finished, 6, 8, 9, 10-inch finished, and 12-inch finished setting triangles. So this is a beautiful example of how we used our 4-inch cube. Look at this. This is that kite shape and those half rectangles. We used our 2.5-inch strip die to finish out 2-inch squares, and then we used our 4-inch setting triangles here for the sides and the corners. You want to make sure you check out setting triangles. It allows you to turn all of those blocks on point. Here's another example of our setting triangles. This actually is the pattern that comes on the packaging. Again, we've taken, it comes in all the different sizes, so 4 all the way up to 12 inches. This is the 8-inch block. So you can see how we've turned this block on point. We've used our cube. So here is our center square is shape number 1. This is shape number 4 here in the corners, half square triangles on the corners, squares on the end, and turned it on point. Then we took the setting triangles and actually created a new block to go in the center. So the thing I love about this is that we've created this star with the off color to match the stars in our center. So these are the new Go setting triangles. Next up is the Go Flamingo die. This super cute die has all of the shapes to make your flamingo. So the flamingo body, it cuts out the wing, the beak, and the eye. Quilters, think how difficult it would be to cut that shape by hand. Now this is a super cute small quilt. It's the Go Flamingo Party small quilt. And what we've done is we've used our 4-inch cube to make this center block. So not only do we need shapes 3 and 5 from the cube, we also need shape 1. And from that companion set angles, we need this great trapezoid shape. Now this is a perfect example of how you don't always have to use those embroidery files. This is raw edge quilting, and look how cute it is. All right, next we have this really fun project called Go Pretty in Pink. Isn't it stunning? Again, we've used our 4-inch cube to make the border. All right, our flamingo is actually 7.5 inches tall, so this is perfect because it makes an 8-inch block. This is a sample of the blanket stitch that we used. This is one of those free embroidery files, $21 value that we're going to give to you free. Now here's my pro tip. Notice that some of the flamingos are facing one way and some are facing the other. To create this look, on half of them you're going to have your fabric facing up, and the other you're going to have your fabric facing down. Remember, with all of our applique shapes, you can pre-fuse your cotton. You could use other fabrics for this as well, but you need to count that fusible as a half a layer of fabric. So if you're using cotton, you can only use 4 layers of pre-fused cotton. Quilters, we are thrilled to announce 2 new strip dies to add to our collection. First is the 2 3/4 inch strip die, which finishes at 2 1/4. This die works perfect with the 9-inch cube for sashing and squares. Next is the 6-inch strip die, which is perfect for borders and larger scale prints. Remember, strip dies are the most versatile Go dies. You can quickly cut long, continuous strips, squares, and even diamonds using the angled guidelines. Here's a sample of our new 2 3/4 inch strip. Notice we've paired it with our 9-inch cube. This pattern is called Go Lattice Throw Quilt. So right here is this 1/4 square triangle from the 9-inch cube. And here is that 2 3/4 inch strip. Doesn't this look beautiful? We've set that square on point, and it's just a fabulous quilt. Next, we have our Go Onward Throw quilt. Now this one, it gives it a totally different look because we're just using those long strips. But again, we've used that 9-inch cube to make flying geese. Remember, every cube has flying geese. You just need shapes 4 and 5. Next up, quilters, we have the Go Pickle Dish die. This is a fabulous die, a block on board or a bob die. It makes a 10-inch finished block, so it works perfect with our 10-inch cube. Also, this is a real traditional block, but you can totally make it modern. The great thing about this die is that it has curved edges, but don't be scared of curves. We've added notches, specialized dog ears for that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and the die itself is screen printed for easy placement. So let's look at a couple of samples of our Go Pickle Dish die. This is called Go Burst of Sunshine. And the great thing about this particular quilt is that it only has 4 of the pickle dish blocks. And then we used our 10-inch mix and match cube and companion set angles to create this great block right here as the sashing. So this is triangle and a square, and this is square on point. I love the colors of this. It gives it a real modern look. It's just stunning. Next, we have this super fun quilt. It is called Go Mod Moo. So this was created for us. It's a very specific design. The pattern has this particular shape right here. It's called the modified A shape right here. So basically what you're going to do is create the pickle dish arch, and then from a template, cut this shape right here. This is super fun, a great way to use up your scraps. You could totally do it in browns if you wanted to create that look for the cow, but I do love the bright pinks. And this particular quilt only needs 3 of the pickle dish blocks. What a great die to bust up your scraps. All right, quilters, that's what's new at AccuQuilt. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you've learned some fun things. And don't forget, at AccuQuilt, we're here to help you cut time so you can quilt more.